Joining us now is retired Admiral Sandy Winnefeld, former vice chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's a CBS News military and homeland security analyst. Admiral, good morning. Two big questions that we've been trying to parse this morning are, what did Iran intend with this attack, and how might the U.S. respond? So let's take the first part of that. More than a dozen ballistic missiles. This is a U.S. base in Iraq. What's the intention of the Iranian military?
Well, first, this was a very, very carefully calibrated attack on the part of Iran. First, what did they use? They used increasingly accurate ballistic missiles, either the Qaim-1 or the Fateh 110, which, other than those that might have gone astray, which always happens, probably hit pretty close to what their targets were. So the second thing is, what were their targets? This is a big, sprawling airbase, mostly desert. They could have targeted these missiles into remote areas to avoid any possibility that an American could be killed. Or they might have done what we would have done, and that is perhaps target aircraft on the ramp, but not barracks or places where there would be a lot of people. And then to your question, the third thing is, what were they trying to accomplish? Well, there were really four key audiences here. The first is the United States. Hey, we can hit you guys, and by the way, we didn't hurt anybody, so please don't start a war with us that we would lose. Second audience, of course, is the internal Iranian audience. And they can say anything they want to that audience. We did this hard revenge. We killed 80 Americans, which of course isn't true. But they have that internal message. The third audience is the international community. Hey, we did this legally in self-defense, so please don't come after us there. And the fourth audience, of course, is the regional audience. Please don't help the Americans retaliate for this. And by the way, why don't you kick them out of the region? So it was very carefully calibrated, and we'll see what happens next.
If you were advising the president at this point, what should happen next, do you think?
Well, there are three major sort of chunky possibilities here. One would be a disproportionate response, which the president alluded to in previous days, but didn't, sign up for necessarily. And I don't think that's what he will do. It's certainly not what I would advise. The next would be a proportional response, where you might just go after in self-defense some of the missile sites, the storage handling facilities, command and control. But there are a lot of problems associated with that option as well. The third is essentially to let this go, and underneath, you sort of have a tacit agreement with Iran that says, we got ours, you got yours, and by the way, we think we might have gotten the better end of this thing. And above the line, you can tell the international community, hey, look how restrained we were, and look how much of a menace this Iranian country is, and why don't you climb on board with sanctions and the like, and at the same time send a very strong message to Iran that says, proxy war is over. That's how this whole thing started. We're not going to let you have your proxies hit us anymore, and we'll go after them if you do, and we'll also go after you.
But Sandy, you have been in the room. You touched on it briefly with Anthony's question. You've been in the room with top security officials, excuse me, when they're having these discussions. What is that conversation like? What exactly are you all? What are they saying to each other at this point?
It's a very good and interesting question.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your perspective, because you're the only one here that knows what that's like.
Sure. Generally, these meetings would start with a review by the intelligence community of what they think happened, why it happened, and what's coming next. And then you would have various people around the table. State Department would provide diplomatic options and what they're hearing from the rest of the international community, some of the implications for some of the things we might do. Of course, you would hear from the military, from the Department of Defense, on what various options would be for some kind of a response, and how we're protecting our own troops in the region. And after all of that is vetted, it really comes down to the person at the end of the table who has the loneliest job on the planet, and who has to integrate all of this information and then decide on a response and a strategy going forward.
Admiral, is your sense that the Iranians are done after this attack? Because they seem to send conflicting signals. The Supreme Leader said it's not over. The Foreign Minister said this was proportionate, and we concluded our response.
Well, I think Michael Murrow said it very well earlier, and that is, I believe the overt piece of this is over, at least as far as the Iranians are concerned. But the proxy piece, the covert piece, remains to be seen. I do think that the proxies in Iraq do want a piece of this action, and so it's not a good time to be complacent about self-defense for our troops. But that's the real question mark, I think, is, as Michael pointed out, where do we go with the nuclear program, and where do we go with covert action from Iran?
All right, bringing us inside the Situation Room there, Admiral Winnefeld, thank you very much.